флота в районе Аденского залива, повышающим эффективность действий, согласно указано на слайде, являются непосредственное сопровождение караванов судов по заданному маршруту из Красного моря в Аравийское море и обратно.
Anti-piracy activity in the Gulf of Aden, specific features of anti-piracy activity of the Russian Navy that increase the effectiveness of actions are to direct escort of ships convoys through a stated route from the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea and back.
Взаимодействие в сфере борьбы с пиратством с военно-морскими соединениями Евросоюза, многочисленных сил, а также многонациональных сил, а также с кораблями ВМС стран, действующих в районе Африканского рога, по национальным планам, по обмену информацией по обстановке в районе, выполнения поставленных задач.
Cooperation on counter-piracy with Navy units of the European Union, multinational forces, as well as with Navy ships of countries that act and operate in the area of the African Horn, according to the national plans on exchanging the information on situation in the task area.
Для повышения защищенности судов, включенных в состав караванов, на них высаживаются личный состав подразделений морской пехоты военно-морского флота. Согласие на размещение групп охраны дают капитаны судов по согласованию с судовладельцами.
To enhance convoy ships protection by deploying Marine Corps personnel, the consent to deployment of security personnel is given by the captains in accordance with the agreement of ships owners.
Для обсуждения основных вопросов взаимодействия и обмена информацией организуются рабочие встречи командиров кораблей. В ходе встреч обсуждаются темы, касающиеся взаимодействия, вопросов противодействия пиратству, такие как осуществление обмена информацией, полученной от средств разведки кораблей, например, от палубной авиации.
Working meetings of commanding officers are organized to discuss the main issues of interaction and exchanging information. During these meetings, the themes concerning the interaction in the issues of counteraction of piracy, such as information exchange received from the intelligence equipment of ships,
Проведение совместных учений по освобождению захваченными пиратами судна.
conducting the joint exercises on releasing the seized ship,
Обмен опытом, поиск новых способов противодействия пиратской активности и решение текущих проблемных вопросов при выполнении задачи борьбы с пиратством.
exchange of experience, finding the new way to counteract the pirate activity and to resolve actual problematic issues in implementing fight against piracy.
Обмен опытом по специальному дооборудованию военных кораблей и судов, привлекаемых к борьбе с пиратами.
Exchange of experience on special additional equipment of military ships and ships involved in the fight against piracy.
Взаимная медицинская поддержка и другие вопросы по согласованию сторон.
Multilateral medicine support and other issues on sides agreement.
Всего с 2008 года проведено более 50 рабочих встреч.
And since 2008, more than 50 working meetings have been conducted.
В рамках решения задачи по защите морского торгового судоходства силами военно-морского флота с 2008 года по настоящее время выполнено 30 походов, сопровождено 152 каравана судов с общим количеством судов 727, из них 56 российских судов. Предотвращено 10 попыток захвата судов, задержано 80 пиратов. Разбойных нападений на суда, следовавшие в сопровождении кораблей ВМФ, не было.
Within the framework of civil shipping protection since 2008 till present time, the Russian Navy executed 30 campaigns, escorted 152 convoys with the total number of ships 727, including 56 ships under the Russian flag, prevented 10 attempts of ships seizure, 80 pirates have been detained. There were no attacks on vessels escorted by the naval forces ships.
Организовано взаимодействие представителей аппарата военного атташе при посольстве Российской Федерации в Республике Сингапур с Международным информационным центром ВМС Республики Сингапур и региональным координационным центром гуманитарной помощи, ликвидации последствий природных бедствий Объединенного штаба Вооруженных сил Республики Сингапур.
Representative of Defense Attaché Office by the Embassy of the Russian Federation in the Republic of Singapore is now cooperating closely with the International Information Center of the Singapore Navy and with the Regional Coordination Center of Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief of the Joint Staff of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Singapore.
При проведении учений или работы в составе центров направляется офицер Национального центра Управления обороной Российской Федерации.
An officer of the National Defense Control Center is being sent every time on the annual basis for the work with the centers during the time of the exercises.
Участие кораблей военно-морского флота в борьбе с морским пиратством будет сохранять свою актуальность на протяжении еще довольно длительного времени. Россия выстраивает свою политику со странами, исходя из интересов, свободных от идеологического и иного давления, на основе строгого соблюдения норм и принципов международного права, закрепленных в Уставе Организации Объединенных Наций, не только в двухстороннем, но и в многосторонних форматах.
The Russian Navy participation in counter-piracy will keep its actual continuity further. Russia shapes its policy with countries going out from the interests free from ideological and other pressure based on strict observation and provisions of principles of the international law stipulated in the United Nations Charter, not only in bilateral, but also in multilateral formats.
В заключение необходимо отметить, что при недостаточном внимании к рассмотрению вопросов новая волна пиратства может стать еще более сложным вызовом для коммерческого судоходства, чем в 2008-2012 годах.
In conclusion, it is necessary to note that with insufficient attention to discussed matters, the new wave of piracy could become more difficult challenge for the commercial shipping than in 2008 up to 2012.
Уважаемые коллеги, полагаем, что условия обеспечения свободы судоходства, мореплавания и морской экономической деятельности могут быть созданы только при объединении наших совместных усилий на основе доверительного взаимодействия и эффективного сотрудничества. Спасибо за внимание.
Distinguished guests, we do believe that the conditions for the freedom of navigation, maritime traffic, and maritime economic activity can be established only through integrating of our trustful jointful efforts and through effective cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, and thank you in particular for highlighting the importance of actually preserving the rich experience from counter-piracy and take it as an example that international cooperation is actually possible, as well as highlighting that piracy de facto remains a risk. As a brief reminder, after our next speaker, we will have time for questions, hopefully answers, as well as comments. So please note down your questions now, and we'll come back to that after our next speaker. And I have the pleasure to introduce Rear Admiral Jimmy Pitts, and he's the commander of the Submarine Group 7 and the Task Forces 54 and 74, active in the West Pacific, in charge for large parts of the Indian Ocean. He looks back to a rich experience as a navigator and officer on submarines and several onshore assignments. Rear Admiral, the floor is yours.
Vice Admiral Ranasinghe, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and and thank you for joining us at the Galle Dialogues this year, and thank you for inviting myself on behalf of the United States to attend this very important dialogue. I am pleased that we have this opportunity to come together and feel that this year's theme, Synergizing for Collaborative Maritime Management, is particularly timely, extremely important, and as such, I look forward to an open exchange of thoughts and ideas. As a nation with global interests, the United States has a vital self-interest in maritime security and enduring commitments to our allies and partners throughout the world. In Asia and the Indo-Pacific, these commitments have been long-standing and encompass a broad spectrum of cooperative engagements and operations to include collaborative activities with our 5 mutual defense treaty allies in the Pacific, bilateral and multilateral military exercises, economic investments, information sharing, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and sometimes decisive military action. The United States has been active in the Pacific since shortly after our birth as an independent nation. My counterpart at CTF 73 has a copy of the ship's log from the USS Vincennes, which visited Singapore in 1836. U.S. military forces and their families from all services and the Coast Guard are currently stationed throughout the Pacific. These forces are largely concentrated in Japan, Korea, and Guam. And the U.S. Navy has its 7th Fleet headquarters in Yokosuka, Japan, and the 3rd Maritime Expeditionary Force in Okinawa. On any given day, the United States military has 70 to 90 ships, 200 to 300 aircraft, and 40 to 50,000 sailors and Marines in the 7th Fleet area of operations. In addition to U.S. based aircraft carriers and expeditionary strike groups conducting rotational deployments to the region, there are over 20 ships and submarines forward deployed to the Western Pacific, with additional ships deployed to the Arabian Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. These U.S. forces routinely interact with countries in South and Southeast Asia during exercises, port visits, transits, and other military-to-military engagements. The United States has engaged in trade, port visits, international commerce, and maintained a forward military presence, fostering military-to-military relationships in the Pacific for over 150 years. 5 of the 7 U.S. mutual defense treaties are with countries in the Pacific: the Republic of Philippines, Thailand, Republic of Korea, Japan, and Australia. If you look at our naval deployments and operating schedules for the last 15 to 20 years, aside from surges to support OEF and OIF, you won't see much deviation. We have been deploying ships and aircraft throughout the Pacific and to the Middle East on a regular basis since the end of World War II. The United States has made significant investments in maritime security in the Pacific. 60% of our attack submarines are now stationed in the Pacific. We have replaced older frigates stationed in Japan and Hawaii with newer guided missile destroyers. We have phased out most of our older P-3 maritime patrol aircraft in favor of newer P-8s. In fact, P-8s were first deployed and operated in the Indo-Pacific. Our carrier air wing in Japan is being upgraded to reflect our newest aircraft, and we have been steadily upgrading our forward deployed aircraft carriers. Defense dialogues in Washington and forums throughout the region have centered on the importance of the military presence in the Pacific. Our goal is to maintain the right balance of presence with a defined purpose. U.S. military presence in the Indo-Pacific continues to be a source of stability and cooperative engagement in the region that opens the door to long-lasting relationships between the United States and countries in the region across the broad spectrum of geopolitical engagement. Our maritime strategy encourages U.S. agencies and foreign countries to work together, to share information, to become more efficient and effective. Greater emphasis has been placed on building relationships with international partners while relying less on unilateral solutions to crises. Regular exercises and routine information sharing, training like you will have to fight, is the best way to establish and cement relationships among partners and allies throughout the region. The security, prosperity, and vital interests of the United States are increasingly coupled to those of other nations. Our nation's interests are best served by fostering a peaceful global system comprised of interdependent networks of trade, finance, information, law, people, and governance. We prosper because of this system of exchange among nations, yet recognize it is vulnerable to a range of disruptions that can produce cascading and harmful effects far from their sources. Major power war, regional conflict, terrorism, lawlessness, and natural disasters all have the potential to threaten world stability and prosperity. Today, 80% of all global trade travels by sea, as does 2/3 of the world's oil. Approximately 60% of maritime trade passes through Asia, highlighting the strategic importance of maritime security, particularly in this area of the world. Equally important to the flow of goods is the flow of services, which travel around the world electronically as bits and bytes. We talk about cyberspace, but a significant percentage of electronic trade travels through cables across the ocean floor, representing trillions of US dollars in trade each year. Clearly, today's world is more interconnected than ever before, and increasingly it is the oceans and that trade that flows above and below the sea that links our global community together, making maritime security a topic of particular interest. Our senior leaders have traveled to the region to engage in multilateral forums and discussions, which provide a path to building trust, confidence, and transparency. Our Secretary of State, Pompeo, recently traveled to Japan, North Korea, South Korea, and China. Our Indo-Pacific Commander, Admiral Davidson, recently traveled to Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, and Oceania. Through regular dialogue engagements and committed forward presence by our military forces and State Department diplomatic corps, we believe that the United States contributes to a more stable and secure Pacific region. Relationships matter. Our Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, recently released our National Defense Strategy earlier this year. It uses the word allies 124 times. As he says, we are not very subtle. We are all Indo-Pacific nations. The U.S. maritime vision is to uphold our shared values for a safe, secure, prosperous, and free Indo-Pacific. We endeavor to achieve this by ensuring respect for the sovereignty and independence of every nation, regardless of its size. Supporting freedom for all nations wishing to transit international waters and airspace. By peaceful dispute resolution without coercion. By free, fair, and reciprocal trade and investment. And finally, adherence to international laws, rules, and norms. U.S. naval units and personnel participate in more than 125 bilateral and multilateral exercises each year in the Pacific Theater, comprising more than 1,700 unit exercise days per year of engagement. In 2002, the U.S. Navy initiated Southeast Asia Cooperation Against Terrorism, or CCAT. CCAT is a multi-stage at-sea naval exercise designed to promote maritime domain awareness and to highlight the value of information sharing. Nations identify and track transnational threats, terrorists and extremists, proliferators of weapons of mass destruction, pirates, traffickers in persons, drugs, and conventional weapons, and other criminals, in order to constrain their movement, query and intercept them when necessary. We recognize that although our forces can surge when necessary to respond to crises, our maritime strategy highlights that trust and cooperation cannot be surged. They must be built over time so that the strategic interests of the participants are continuously considered, while mutual understanding and respect are promoted. Over the years, this exercise, CCAT, has become increasingly complex. As other members of this panel have brought up, piracy is a problem that affects all maritime stakeholders. Combined Task Force 151 is a multinational maritime task force that was established in 2009 to counter piracy in the Gulf of Aden, Arabian Sea, and the Western Indian Ocean. At any given time, Task Force 151 consists of 20 nations operating together to solve a common problem. Before Task Force 151, countries which operated in the maritime domain were solely responsible for defending their own interests from piracy Those individual efforts made little impact on the effects of piracy in the region. Since its formation in 2009, Task Force 151 has dramatically decreased the frequency of piracy. The success of Task Force 151 is a reflection of increased maritime security due to joint efforts by regional nations. CCAT and CTF 151 are only two examples of U.S. commitment to maritime security in the region. RIMPAC, Talisman Sabre, Cobra Gold, Malabar, and Pacific partnerships are additional examples of exercises that foster and enhance partnerships, cooperation, and enable our collective fleets to be more flexible, cohesive, and responsive in this dynamic and rapidly changing world. In addition to exercises, foreign military sales enhance regional capabilities, enabling countries to have expanded, battle-tested technology. As countries purchase similar hardware and software, interoperability among nations is vastly improved. A key element of maritime security is maritime domain awareness. The ability to share a common operational picture is a force multiplier, particularly for areas such as the Straits of Malacca and the South China Seas, where shared exclusive economic zones and transnational ship transit is commonplace. As nations learn to share information about potential threats, regional security and confidence among neighboring countries increase significantly. Maritime domain awareness and maritime security cannot be solved individually. International cooperation is critical to that success. Trust and cooperation must be built over many years so that both countries have a mutual confidence in one another's abilities and a thorough understanding of each other's strategic interests, as well as a basic understanding of one another culturally and historically. The U.S. maritime strategy is a flexible vision of voluntary partnerships of varying levels of formality, scope, and capability to meet the world's needs. Without actions by nations to bring it to life, again, actions being the key word, our maritime strategy would be just another policy document. It is only by committed navies acting in the interest of our global commons that we will achieve maritime security. In this era of globalization and uncertainty, the United States is committed to operating with our allies, partners, and friends, upholding key alliances and expanding regional maritime partnerships.